Look at that. Always like to hear skylarks start to sing in February. And this one's chosen a lovely day for it. It's a lovely sunny Sunday morning, and there's quite a decent temperature as well. One or two invertebrates will be out. In fact, I've had Salticus seneca, the zebra jumping spider, out on the wall for the first time this year at home. But of all the lovely habitats we have in Nottinghamshire and all the nice places I could go, I choose to sit by this large pile of manure. People that know me probably won't be at all surprised, but there's things that lurk in manure heaps. Now I've come around the back of the manure heap, and that's purely because the oldest part of this heap is just at the back there where the grass is growing on it. That was obviously the first pile that the farmer put in here. But you can just go in, grab yourself a handful, put it in the carrier bag and go off home merrily on your way. But it pays if you take the time out and be a little bit more selective. When I say selective, I mean like this. This is the ideal type of manure to work with. A lot of the manure here is just randomly dumped, but what you're looking for, the best types for false scorpions at least, is manure in which the straw and the manure has become layered over time. Layered as in so that you can peel it off in layers like that, and as you peel it off you break that layer up and work your way through it. That's the best kind of manure. So that's what I'm going to pick out from here and round the back there. Look for something promising and then bag it up and off we go. Now come round the back and this looks ideal to me. There's another reason why it looks ideal, and that it's south facing. False scorpions, they like it hot, and so by choosing to take a sample from this piece here, which is going to be in layers, as you can see, it catches a lot of sun and it's dry, so hopefully we might be successful. Sometimes you can pick stuff up, and when it's in layers like this, false scorpions will just be sat there, but they're usually fairly active in manure. There is an awful lot of wood lice here, and the wood lice that you find in manure heaps is Porcellanides pruinosus, and that is usually only found in manure. So it turns up temporarily where manure piles are dumped, and then the population presumably dies out. Farmyards are typical places to find Porcellanides, and it is quite a swift species, difficult to photograph. So we just dig in a little bit more for our sample. We don't want to get anything that's too damp, just damp on point of dryness is usually better. Lots of wood lice. Sometimes though, whether you get scorpions will depend on just hitting that right spot. But as a general rule, the longer a manure pile has been outside and subject to the weather and drying out and maturing, quite often the better your chance of success in finding false scorpions. Well, I've got a decent carrier bag full here, so that should do us. Well, the sun's gone in, although within a few seconds or so it's going to be back out, but I've got my manure sample here, and now I can take it home. You can seal the bag up, you clip it together at the top and seal it up, keep it in the shed or wherever and sort through it at my leisure. It can be in a few weeks' time if I so desire. I won't leave it that long, but it doesn't really matter. There's nothing urgent, nothing that won't not keep it here. So it's an ideal pastime for all the family, going out into a field and collecting some manure and then sorting through it as a family. But probably not. I dare say no one will take up my challenge of sorting through a bag of this just to find a few false scorpions, but the reasons for doing it are to add more records to the Nottinghamshire database. The woodlouse that we found today, that is a new species and a new record for here, and within quite a few miles of here. Only by looking in manure heaps will you find one or two invertebrates that are quite unique to this manure heap habitat. But it's great fun. Always a chance of finding something rare and interesting, and hopefully such thing is in here. So we've now got our samples safely back home. It's time to go through it, and I'm doing it indoors largely because it's far more comfortable. And all you need, simple white tray. White is best because it shows false scorpions and other interesting small invertebrates up far better. Once you've found your small invertebrates or false scorpions, you need a selection of small pots to house them in temporarily while you finish sorting the sample. In terms of all the equipment, I have just a pair of tweezers, a small brush and a magnifying glass complete with light. Often helps a lot more for closer examination. So, time to begin sorting. Right then, so we'll get our first piece of material. I like to take it out by the handful. Don't take big handfuls out. And then it's a case of breaking and just pulling it apart gently. Despite being very small, most invertebrates are incredibly tough things. Once you've broke it up, toss it around pretty much like you'd be tossing a salad. Then remove the excess, and then it's a case of watching. There will be invertebrates in every sample, and one of the commonest will be larger versions of this spider here. This is a very young spider called Ostearius melanopygius, and it's a spider which you will inevitably find in every single sample of manure or compost heaps. Very, very commonly found. But it's a species that's not been around that long really in Nottinghamshire, and Dillis and myself first found it in 2015, and I think that was the first for Nottinghamshire. But there are a number of specimens of Ostearius. Another one here looks slightly larger. It is identifiable. There's no other species that you're likely to misidentify it with. And the key identifying feature in Osteoreus is that the end of the abdomen, especially in the males, is tipped black. Rather looks like it's been dipped in ink. There will be hundreds and hundreds of tiny lignifid spiders in any sample, and also lots and lots of tiny beetles. You see that little tiny thing moving there? That is a beetle. I can't identify it because that's too small, and I mean that's just about a millimetre in length. I did tell you we were talking small, but what we're after are false scorpions. There's that Osteoreus there just running off. One of half a dozen or so in this sample. No false scorpions. You need to sort of watch for the characteristic movement of false scorpions. When you see one, you'll be absolutely overjoyed. I still get a thrill out of seeing them in any kind of sample. They suddenly appear, they'll stay still often at first, and then they'll move. And false scorpions can move backwards as fast as they can move forwards. But there will be a host of interesting beetles in amongst any sample, but they will be tiny. Well, there's no false scorpions in there, nothing particularly interesting. So, next sample. Well, I'm continuing to work my way through this sample. It is painstaking, and there are other ways of doing this. You can let sample dry out from the top. If you have the sample in a container with a hole at the bottom, and let that sample dry out from the top, and invertebrates usually like some degree of moisture, and as it dries, the sample dries out from the top, the invertebrates go down and down, and eventually they come out and drop out of the hole at the bottom into a container. I think it's called a tungsten funnel or something like that. But if you've collected a sample such as this and then leave it overnight, a lot of your invertebrates will go down to the bottom of the carry bag. So quite often just about the last few handfuls can be most productive, especially in terms of beetles. And I have picked out a couple of beetles, very small. One is a tiny staff, and the other one looks like Monotoma bicolor, which is not a common species. There's a couple of monotomas that it could be, and it needs closer inspection. But still, no false scorpion. There's not forced to be a false scorpion if the sample hasn't been there long enough. But we'll continue. Well, I've got one. On to this second sample. I'll try and keep it in the frame, in the middle of your picture. They just suddenly appear. If I just move that out there like that, then it's just against that wood there, look. And as you can see, we're not talking enormous here. This is one of several species, which it could be. It could be a Lamprochornes or it could be a Cephalocurnes. It needs a closer examination. They're just fabulous things to come across. I first found out about them years ago when I was a gardener on the Nottingham City Council Recreation Department on the Arboretum, and we had some large piles of leaf mould there, and the leaf mould was donkey's years old in parts. And one of the gardeners who had a bit of interest in this kind of thing, he says, "Oh, have you seen the false scorpions?" I said, "You are?" And then he told me about them, but I never did find out what species it was. It could be one of a couple, could have been Neobitium carcinoides. So a success. This is the second bag of the samples. This is the larger bag that you saw me take a sample of yesterday. Where's it gone? Oh, there's, it's not tucked away, so try and move the debris away so you can see it. But yeah, this is the manure that you saw me sampling, where it's in layers, and I was beginning to think that we wouldn't get one, but we have. Let's move that out of the way. It's a whole new world. Now here's a nice find. It's something that many people won't have seen before. Moth trappers may have seen it, not bothered by it, because there's few records of this in Nottinghamshire. And this, under this container here, because these are flighty little blighters, is lesser earwig or labia minor, often common in piles of manure. Let's see if this one will play. It is playing, and it's just there. You may want it move, and that is fully grown. That's the smaller version of your common and garden earwig. We'll see if we can get it back in shot. Here we go. Just they rarely stop, actually. If I was to shove a camera in its face, it would do that and do a runner, but that's the lesser earwig. I'll put a photo in. You can see it's just less than a centimetre in length. In some can occur in big numbers in some manure heaps, especially if they're long standing, but there are few records. No one's sending any earwig records, I doubt, other than myself, to the county recorder. But there we are. That's the lesser earwig. Often turns up at NV light on nights that are humid and of high insect activity, but otherwise rarely seen. And we'll see if we can pop this chap up. So the basic technique then for this is, if it's layered like this, just break a layer off and then start to open it out, and quite frequently tap it. But you're looking to split. The invertebrates that you get in here can get into the slightest of gaps. They can get right in amongst the straw. So whereas you may think that, well, nothing can possibly be in there, you'll quite often be surprised. It's a case of breaking it up, not roughly, And then, as I mentioned, toss it, so you toss in a salad, remove the excess. You're never going to see everything unless you're really diligent. But usually what you're looking for is in a manure sample in good numbers. So then you take out most by hand of the larger clumps, and then what I do is just spread what remains around a little bit so that you've got gaps in between, and then you just watch for about a minute or two. You'll be surprised at what's in. If you were to take the sample in midsummer, there will be many more invertebrates than what's in here. And then you just look for false scorpions or small beetles appearing, and you're looking for movement. There's lots of beetle larvae in here. Just some bits there, just there. Lots of tiny fly larvae. If you do this during the summer and you bring the sample home, then I suggest that you go through and sort the sample outside. I have done it sort of late autumn, early winter, and I've done it here in this little room and probably been swarmed by hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny black flies. So, carry on through the sample, flushed with the success of finding that first false scorpion. And we've got a second. Almost certainly it'll be the same species. If I try and keep it towards the middle of the screen, visually it looks the same. And I must admit that in all of the samples that I've ever taken, I've only ever had one species at a time. In any manure heap or straw heap, old bales of straw are just as good. And the most successful will be if you select straw that just feels damp, looks dry but just feels damp. They don't like the moist stuff, so. But there we are, success. And it's a new grid square record for whichever of the species this could be. Now it could be Lampricornes nodosus, could even be Lampricornes chiseri. Maybe it could be something that I've not seen before. But these aren't large. This brush head is about 2 millimeters across, so you can see that this is small. And I think this will turn out to be the same species. I need to photograph it first and then have a look, see if I can see the relevant features by photograph. If not, we'll put it under a microscope and then I can identify it for definite. I just love these. See, they can move in any direction as quick as any other. Doing this kind of thing, sorting through organic material, is a great pastime for during the winter months, those long dark months. Get yourself comfortable, get a bright light, and a bag of material to sort through. You can do the same with leaf mould, and then have a look for these. They are wonderful and fascinating invertebrates. But this kind of work, this is the kind of thing that you can be doing during the winter months or the autumn months and the winter months. There's no need to be idle. You can be recording invertebrates all the time. Admittedly, these are small, as are most of the beetles that you'll find in here. Hence why not many people do them, because they don't do the small stuff. But these are great. You've not got many species in the UK. You've got even less in Nottinghamshire to go at. But there's the potential for new species. But they're fascinating things, and it's another world. It's a different world. It's a microscopic world. One of the joys of invertebrates and invertebrate recording. There's something for everyone. You never know exactly what you're going to find, but you can find species like this almost anywhere. There are species that are predominantly synanthropic, which means that they like human habitation. Farms and farmyards and outbuildings are all great places that you can look for a couple of species. And manure heaps and compost heaps are also great places to look. As we've found, we've been successful. So pop this one up and we'll find out exactly what it is. Whatever it is. It's a new grid square for whatever species it turns out to be in Nottinghamshire. And to me, that's the most important thing. Creating awareness of what's about and where it is. Well, by now you're wondering what species the false scorpion actually was. Well, it's this, Labraconnes nodosus. Commonly found in manure heaps, still not many Nottinghamshire records, and that's purely because nobody's looking. So now you know what to do next Sunday afternoon. Grab yourself a carry bag and find that manure pile.